Fifth dimension? I thought I'd share another personal experience with you guys. Hopefully you will enjoy it, but honestly, I was also hoping to get some feedback on what I might have experienced, as this particular instance is quite unlike any of my others. So basically, it was a completely ordinary day. I was staying with my father and stepfamily for a few weeks over the summer. My parents are divorced, and my stepsister Katie and I decided it'd be fun to get out of the house for a bit. We got ready, and were about to head out the door when my stepmother crossly reminded us that Katie still hadn't done her chores for the day. We didn't put up a fight. Katie hurried into the kitchen to start putting away dishes. I lagged a bit behind and hung out just outside the kitchen, since it didn't have much standing room. In this house, there was a large square dining room connected to a narrow hallway-shaped kitchen that cut through to the garage. I stood there probably about 5 feet away, watching Katie work while debating whether or not I could help speed things up in the kitchen or if I'd just be in the way. All of a sudden, this cup, it was average size, glass and slightly opaque, kinda just appeared above her head and smashed into the counter, sending glass shards everywhere. She turned to look at me and we were both just stared at each other for a moment before her mother yelled angrily from the other room, demanding to know the source of the noise. Katie told her a glass had broken, but kept insisting she didn't do it. My stepmother wasn't buying it and became frustrated. Katie protested all of this and even had me testify that it fell from the level of the top shelf, which she couldn't have reached. I agreed, and even added that it almost looked more like it fell from the ceiling. My stepmother was done hearing it and just instructed Katie to clean up the mess quickly. I noticed a small shard left over, which I snuck off with so that I could investigate further. My stepmother still seemed angry, so I was waiting until later. When the coast was clear, I decided to do some investigating. I compared the glass shards to all the type of cups we owned. We bought them in sets, and it didn't match any of them. It was greenish. Ours were all completely clear, and thicker than we had owned any of the ones that we owned. I've seen things move around before, but never just appear, like, blinking out of thin air, you know? Does it sound like any known phenomenon out there? I remember reading about a supposed fifth dimension in some paranormal non-fiction book series called The Unexplained at my school library, and I thought it sounded kind of like that, but I have very little information of anything of the sort. Any ideas on what it could be or more information on the dimension idea that I just proposed? If any of you guys give me any advice or any insights on this, it would be greatly appreciated. Real experience, getting lost in the fourth dimension in India. This is a true story that was told by one of my relatives. To my relative, if you are reading this, I apologize if you did not want this story to be shared, but I just want more people to know about this type of event. You know, those stories about people getting stuck in one place, just walking in circles over and over again? These events usually take place in a forest, where it's quite easy to get lost. So, you question the legitimacy of those stories. Anyone could end up walking in circles in a forest. But this one is unquestionably legit. It took place in a very populated urban area, and 2 people witnessed the same event. This relative of mine was going on a vacation to India with one of her friends. As an enthusiast of spirituality, she suggested that they should go witness a water burial by the side of a river. So, the both of them ended up going to a river where people performed water burials. That was very close to the hotel that she was staying at. Basically, they watched people perform these water burials. As they watched the bodies being handled, her friend said she cringed from seeing the legs move around, as if those bodies were still alive. Eventually, they decided to leave. Then, they realized that something was not right. The skies were sunny beforehand, but all of a sudden, the skies became overcast. and everything became relatively darker. My relative and her friend both witnessed this. They were trying to get back to the hotel, but they found out that there was a problem. Even though they kept walking in one direction, they still ended up at the same place they were before. They ended up back at the river. Both of them, at that moment, were extremely confused and scared at that point, because it was impossible for them to walk in circles like that. They walked one straight friggin' line. The hotel was extremely close, so there was no reason for them not to be able to find their way back, right? So they tried to walk back again and again from the river and back to the river. They also realized that something was peculiar about their surroundings. Not only did the weather itself drastically change from before, the large road signs on the side of the road were gone. All gone. Also, there were a lot of people walking around the area before all this happened. Now, more than half of the people at this moment were gone, and there were children playing soccer around the area. It felt like they walked in circles for a full 3 hours. And after those 3 hours, the weather was back to normal, and everything was back. Everyone was back as well. The road signs were visible again, and the children playing soccer were all gone. The two of them looked at each other and said nothing. They ran back to the hotel as fast as they could. Edit. I apologize for not specifying this. This is an important detail. As soon as they decided to leave, the weather and population density changed. Now, I'm not sure how in sync this was, or when they noticed the population change, but the weather was the first thing they noticed the moment they decided to depart. But when everything got back to normal, the weather and the population density both reverted back to normal at the exact same time. In sync. The creepy stories about our house my Nana told me that kept me up at night. Hi all. I made a post yesterday asking people about their favorite Australian spooky stories. I myself am Australian, and I love reading or hearing about that stuff. Then I realized I don't need to search for any because I have a crap load of my own, personal and told to me by my nan, mom, and other loved ones. I remember coming home one time from a holiday when I was 12 or under, and my nan told me of a startling experience she had while I was away. Now, curiosity gets the better of me. I asked if she had any more, and she was all happy to oblige. I didn't sleep that night. All of these experiences all take place at a house in which I used to live in from where I was born in the early 90s. To when we moved in year 2002. This house was a very special house. It was simultaneously my favorite and most feared place in the world, and you're about to find out why. To make a brief description, it was my old house. For Australian houses anyways, it was pretty freaking old. It was itself fairly big, on 5 acres of land, in a fairly populated suburb, but also full of forest and bush, sitting at the foot of the Blue Mountains, an hour west of Sydney. We had our land, and behind us was a sort of government-owned forest land. That was 100 or 200 acres, and the council gave 0 fucks about people doing their shit there. Hopefully, that will give you a better picture of the stories in which I'm about to tell. I'll start with a story my nan told me first, which really stood out to me, and finish on the one that's perhaps the creepiest. I talked to my nan and mother not too long ago to confirm all the details that I'm about to share with you guys. So, strap yourselves in, this will be a bit long, but hopefully be worth it. The first story happened when I was visiting my father and grandparents interstate. My nan was, of course, home alone in this house doing the ironing when she saw a little boy walk into my room. Surprised to see that I'm home, She walked into my bedroom to see what the hell I'm doing there. She stopped immediately as she walked inside, because it wasn't me sitting on my bed, but a boy that looked remarkably like me, but off somehow. Not in an evil or twisted way or anything like that, but she knew he was different to living beings like us. At that moment, they stared at each other for what seemed like minutes, and not knowing what to do, she tried to be as passive as possible and said, "I'm sorry, little one, but we're moving soon. You can come with us, though." He didn't respond, but after a few moments of silence, he stood up and ran straight for the door and through her. She didn't see the boy again. You should never invite things like that into your home, even if seemingly innocent. The second story was when my nan was much younger, and both my mother and my uncle were children at the time. My nan was hanging up washing on the line when she heard a strange humming noise she never heard in her life before. She, at that moment, was startled, so she started calling for her children. She walked to the other end of the yard and looked up and saw what my mother and uncle were staring at. Hovering and ascending slowly to the ground was some sort of flying saucer made of something metallic and silver, and it was rotating. It came down to a couple of feet off the ground, humming still and all, and left a giant circular bird mark in the paddock. It left after a few moments, ascending higher and higher into the sky, and whooshed off into the distance, not to be seen again. Once it seemed like a safe height, it was gone. The horses themselves were mental for death. The third story, which may have something to do with aliens or UFOs, was actually told to me by my mother this time. She told me that one night when she was sleeping, a few years ago before I was even born, she suddenly woke up to lights flashing all around her. She was freaked out, but that was only the beginning. She was suddenly aware that there was someone on top of her. Still in her fugue state, as we all are sometimes after just waking up, she went to cuddle who she thought was her boyfriend at the time. The dimensions weren't right though, and then she realized it wasn't her boyfriend, but some man-like creature, but all parts of the body disproportioned: bigger head, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, bigger hands, bigger torso, and it was all funky looking. She tried to scream but couldn't, and somehow, sensing things weren't going to plan, this thing seemed to be penetrating her somehow, not sexually, but in a sort of supernatural way, with some sort of supernatural force. She told me as I talked to her on the phone that she had been raped somehow, although not sexually, not with penises or vaginas or any of the human body parts or anything like that. She felt like this thing was stealing her eggs or something like that. Now, I would like to note, my mom has never been hysterical about sexual harassment and that was the first I heard of that story, so she wouldn't be making it up for sympathy, you know? Once it had what it came for, it just disappeared. She ran into my nan's room, still unable to scream for a while, and cried herself to sleep while my nan consoled her. She didn't much like that room after that. The fourth story is my mother again, and I'll try to keep this one shorter. Me and my little cousin were very young at the time, both under 6 or 7 years old, and we were taking a bath. Now, we seemed alright, and Mom went to check on things for a couple moments. Next thing I remember, my little cousin was completely underwater, and it felt like a while. I didn't do anything though because I was still young at the time, and it wasn't fucking clicking in my head that she was in trouble. I guess I must have thought she was doing some trick or something, like she knew exactly what she was doing. Next thing, before even a minute went by, my mom rushed into the room, picked her up, and dried her and cuddled her. I asked her when I was older what that was all about, and she told me that she had heard a woman screaming from the bathroom her name, but there was no one there but me and my cousin. My cousin's head being underwater and me being a boy. It just doesn't make sense. And I didn't even hear anything, let alone a woman screaming. I don't know. Maybe something was protecting us. I mean, that's what I like to think anyways. It helps me sleep at night. The last story is the creepy one. Or should I say the creepiest one, like I mentioned. I said earlier that there was a council, forested area out the back of our place. Now, I used to be an adventurer. I surely would have been on Captain Cook's ship if I were alive at the time, and I would be in there for hours a day, without there ever being any sort of trouble. One time, though, makes my hair stand up on my neck thinking about it. Me and my family and friends were looking for a horse that had somehow gone past a barbed wire fence separating our house from the council lands. My mom said I could run riot because I always did, and maybe I could be the one to find the horse, right? I've been separated from them for maybe a half-hour's time, and I came across this abandoned 19th century settler house on this land. It could be better described as a ruin, though. I mean, there was no roof, 3 walls, 2 rooms, and right next to it was a pit that went down into complete darkness. Now, although I don't think it was too deep, maybe about 20 feet, and it was covered with logs to stop the horses from falling in. As I was doing my thing around this ruin, I heard someone calling my name. Kike? I thought it was my mom until I realized it was coming from the pit. I wouldn't last in a horror movie, though, because I friggin' started approaching it at that moment. All of a sudden, when I was maybe 20 feet away, still hearing this thing calling my name, I heard my mom calling behind me and running over to me. She pulled me away from there and told me not to go near there ever again. I asked her why, and she told me years later that she said so. Because she heard what was calling my name too. So it wasn't just me. Now, those are the stories about the house. Really, I hope you enjoyed them. These weren't creepypastas or no sleep. All 100% real experiences in which I and my loved ones experienced at this special house, at this special place, at this special dimension. My mom wanted to talk about more stories when we see each other next time, so I may have more to come. Cheers, guys, and happy reading.